All right, let's get right into it. We're talking about a super high-stakes showdown that's brewing in the Middle East. And really, it all boils down to two men, Donald Trump and Ali Khamenei. Now, this is not some new fight. This is a conflict that's been simmering for decades, and it feels like it just might be about to boil over. And just to give you a sense of the stakes here, listen to this. This is Iran's supreme leader, and he is not messing around. He's not just talking about a war. He is promising a massive conflict that would drag the entire region into it. That's the knife's edge we're looking at right now. So, what's actually happening on the ground? Well, at this very moment, something President Trump himself called a beautiful armada is coming together in the Middle East. We're talking about a huge American military force moving into position, and you better believe the whole world is holding its breath. And when we say a military buildup, we are not kidding. You've got the USS Abraham Lincoln. That's a full-on aircraft carrier. You've got extra fuel tankers, fighter jets, destroyers, even air defense batteries to try and block any Iranian counterpunch. Let's be real, you do not move this much hardware for some small operation. This tells us America is planning something big. But to really get how we ended up here, you have to understand the two men at the very center of it all. This isn't just a geopolitical crisis. It's a deeply personal showdown that's been almost 40 years in the making. I mean, think about this. Let's go all the way back to 1988. You have a younger Donald Trump, a New York businessman, saying that if Iran so much as fires one bullet, he'd do a number on Karg Island. At the exact same time, Ali Khamenei, who was Iran's president back then, is vowing to turn the waterway into a graveyard for Americans. It's wild, because almost 4 decades later, the way they talk is pretty much exactly the same. The only thing that's really changed? The immense power they both have. To really get this standoff, you have to look at what's driving them. On one side, you have Trump. He's not really a man of fixed ideology, but he has this personal, decades-long thing with Iran. It seems like he thinks they've made America look weak for way too long, and he wants to be the guy who finally settles the score. Then you have Khamenei. For him, it's all about one thing, and one thing only, the survival of his clerical regime. He sees any compromise, any small concession, not as a diplomatic win, but as the first domino to fall on the path to total collapse. And that really rigid, no-compromise approach has actually put Khamenei in a really tough spot. His regime is not popular at home, to put it mildly. He's overseeing both an economic and an environmental disaster. So his refusal to bend, which he thought would protect his power, has actually made it weaker. He's basically backed himself into a corner. So you might be thinking, with all this pressure, is there any room for diplomacy? Is there some off-ramp here, a way to talk this out? Well, there is a path, but it is incredibly narrow, and it's just loaded with landmines. So, get this. There are talks scheduled in Oman on February 6th. On the surface, that sounds like a little glimmer of hope, right? But the Iranians are extremely wary. They haven't forgotten what happened last summer when they say an offer of talks was just used as a trick right before the U.S. bombed their nuclear sites. Trust is basically at zero. So what does America's side of the deal look like? Well, their position really rests on 3 main demands. They want Iran to rein in its nuclear work, sure, but also to completely end its ballistic missile program and to cut off funding for all its proxy militias around the region. For the U.S., these points are not up for debate. And boom, right there, that's the deadlock. Because Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, has publicly called these demands impossible concessions. So you have America laying down these hard red lines, and Iran is basically saying, nope, can't do it, impossible. So, where do you even go from there? Well, you probably don't go very far. Back in Washington, the consensus from experts to officials is pretty clear. These talks are almost guaranteed to fail, and that, of course, just pivots the whole conversation away from diplomacy and toward the alternative. Which brings us to the climax. If words don't work, and most people think they won't, then the stage is set for a final showdown, and this is one that involves military action. So the billion-dollar question hanging over everything is this. If that diplomatic door really does slam shut, what happens next? What does that military action actually look like? From what we can gather, American officials are weighing 3 main scenarios. First, a small symbolic attack, something just to avoid looking weak. Second, what sources are literally calling a big one, a massive strike that would be justified by that huge military force they've already assembled. And third, the most extreme option of all, targeting the regime's top leaders, maybe even Khamenei himself. And a quote from one Western diplomat really sums up the thinking perfectly. He said, Trump can't move all these assets to the region only to bomb some empty Revolutionary Guard bases. In other words, the scale of the preparation suggests the response is going to be pretty significant. Now, the ultimate goal of a large-scale attack, especially one that takes out the leadership, wouldn't just be about punishment. No, the strategic endgame would be to force a fundamental political change inside Iran, to basically cut the head off the snake and hope something better grows in its place. And that leaves us with the final, pretty terrifying question. A strike of that magnitude would absolutely force change, no doubt about it. But what kind of change? Would it actually lead to a more moderate Iran? Or would it just unleash total chaos, creating a power vacuum that allows something far, far worse to emerge? That is the ultimate gamble. And honestly, it is anyone's guess.